After Isha's sacrifice and Vander being taken away by Zinch, Jinx found herself locked within a cell, arrested, before Caitlyn got a chance to make any decision regarding her fate. But it wasn't the cell that really imprisoned Jinx. It wasn't the prison bars. It was her own despair, her own hopelessness, her own state of deep unhappiness. Not long before, she has found herself in a place she never suspected to be in again, by Vander's side, with Vi's unconditional support and acceptance. But it was all taken away from her just as soon as she got it back, and brutally. Isha, a girl she was taking care of, a girl she saw herself in and one that also resembled Vi, a girl that played a big part in reuniting her unlikely family, one that had nothing but good intentions to offer, one that saw her as she was, sacrificed herself right in front of her eyes, used a gemstone in a similar way as she once did back in Season 1, trying to protect Vander. For Jinx, losing Isha and, again, her father, was a step too far in her long way down. And Episode 8 of Arcane Season 2 felt like a limbo of a kind for Jinx, who was now facing her own demons, almost like in a Christmas story, except that all the ghosts that showed up were that of her past. Silco, her adoptive father, one that never quite became what a true father's supposed to be, only ever loving Jinx and not Powder, telling her the cycle would only end if she removes herself from it. Vi, who loved Powder, and who in the end learned how to accept Jinx, yet again trying to save her, proving her love is now unconditional. Caitlyn, who never quite knew Powder, but who hated Jinx throughout majority of Season 2, and for a good reason, bringing what seems to be her final plea for revenge. Today it's precisely Caitlyn's presence right next to Jinx in a cell that I want to discuss. Because while Silco showing up with his philosophical approach to the cycle of violence was Jinx's own dialogue, her telling herself she has to break it, while Vi showed up being the true sister that perhaps wasn't there for her in certain moments of the story, but one who was present now. Caitlyn showing up ready to confront Jinx was by far the biggest character development for Caitlyn and for Jinx. Caitlyn and Jinx, as I have discussed in a previous video, have a lot in common, more than they realize, more than we might have noticed on first glance. They're both motivated, likely to get obsessed. They both are heavily focused on their weapons of choice, albeit they use them in very different ways. Caitlyn with a more organized, distanced approach, Jinx chaotically. They both have similar visual traits. Both lost their parents. Both were placed in a position of power they did not want in Season 2. Both became symbols against their will. But most of all, what connects them in a far greater way than any of the things that I have listed is the fact that both deeply care for Vi. It's precisely the love for Vi that opened their minds enough to have a conversation long overdue, when too many things were lost anyway. But it was still possible to perform an act of forgiveness both for themselves and for Vi, who, torn between her own emotions, her feelings of love she had for Caitlyn and Jinx, had to struggle throughout majority of the plot, repeatedly choose sides, and declare herself against someone she deeply cared for. Both Caitlyn and Jinx manipulated Vi at certain parts of the story. Both expected Vi to get rid of the other one without asking her if that's what she really wanted. What did she even feel? So in the end, taking that step towards forgiveness in the cell was a step taken because of love. But it's not by far the cell itself where they let go of their mutual hatred. And I want to track down the exact moment when they stopped being mortal enemies. For Jinx, the very last time we saw her openly and uncontrollably hating Caitlyn was back in Season 1 during the final dinner when she asked Vi to get rid of her. What followed soon was Jinx's grand revenge. Emotions-driven act of despair performed towards the council, towards Piltover. A revenge for Silco's death, which ironically she herself caused, but one that by far she was not responsible for indirectly. It was everyone, the entire conflict, the injustices, the inequality. Jinx killing Cassandra Kiraman, Caitlyn's mother, was an act that relieved her inner pressure that was aimed directly at Caitlyn and combined with losing Silco, led to this feeling of overwhelming grief that she couldn't, reasonably speaking, direct against Caitlyn any longer. For Caitlyn, on the other hand, this was precisely that very act that turned her less personal approach towards Jinx in Season 1 to obsessive and character-focused approach in Season 2. While Jinx was fixated with Caitlyn in Season 1, jealous, angry, feeling replaced by Vi's side, Caitlyn's obsession peaked after her mother died, where she couldn't handle her own emotions and commenced a personal vendetta. While in Season 1, it was Jinx who expected Vi to get rid of Caitlyn. In Season 2, it was Caitlyn expecting Vi to get rid of Jinx. Vi both times tried to meet their expectations, never quite providing enough for either of the sides. So while Jinx in Season 2 did not show open hatred towards Caitlyn anymore, for Caitlyn, it was the exact opposite. Now, we were never quite shown when Jinx found out it was Caitlyn's mother that died in the attack, but we know she did find out, and we know she wasn't aware she was there.
I didn't know your mom was there. It probably wouldn't have made a difference, but I didn't know.
For Jinx, it's as far as saying sorry could have gone, telling Caitlyn she wasn't aware. It's a major thing to tell someone because as a result, Caitlyn found out that something that she thought was personal, in fact wasn't. Jinx early on in Season 2 must have been driven not only by grief caused by Silco's loss, but also some sense of guilt she took it a step too far.
You ever need to curse a sibling or a family or a society? My card.
While Jinx can be a lot of things, she probably isn't a parent murderer. After all, she's the one that out of them three lost the most parent figures. She lost her own biological parents. She lost Vander because of her own act. She lost Silco while responsible for it. Then she lost Vander again. She's by far not someone who would take away a parent, even from her greatest enemy that Caitlyn at the time felt like to her. So while Jinx confronted Caitlyn by the end of Act 1, while she assumed the role of a revolution symbol thrown to her and again stood directly on the opposite side to Caitlyn, it no longer felt personal, at least not quite as personal as it felt to Kate, who was clearly obsessed with the idea of getting Jinx, of getting her vendetta, capturing her, even killing her. During their confrontation, while it by far felt like Caitlyn's sole goal was to get to Jinx, while it felt like she was losing it and becoming unpredictable, unhinged, very much like Jinx back in Season 1, Jinx was mostly focused on confronting Vi, not once acknowledging verbally Caitlyn's presence.
I'm glad it's you. Had to be you.
Even when Caitlyn turned against Vi, was willing to aim her gun towards Vi, going as far as shooting her, an act no doubt desired by Jinx back in Season 1, she still felt indifferent. Whether it was Isha's presence that reminded her who she used to be, whether it was the fact when she lost Silco she just gave up, or the fact she knew murdering Cassandra was as far as she was ever willing to go, that in fact she wasn't even going to go there at all. Her hatred towards Caitlyn did not quite feel as present as it once used to be, and for Caitlyn it was the opposite. While she let go of her darkest despair during this confrontation, while she realized she had the person she cared the most about in the entire world as a result of hatred towards Jinx, she still pushed Vi away, her moral compass, the one person that kept her grounded, to pursue her own agenda. She was blinded by it enough to let herself be manipulated, tricked by Ambessa. She was blinded by it enough to not notice horrible things that were happening on Piltover and Zone borders. Yet, she no longer seemed as lost as she was in Act 1. And I think, despite Vi not being there by her side any longer, it was precisely Vi's words that kept coming back to her, that she's the one acting like Jinx. She saw herself in Jinx subconsciously, and while still revenge-driven, she calmed down. When she saw Vi again, it became clear that her one single goal should never have been that vendetta, that it should have been being a good present partner for Vi. A good leader for Piltover who seeks out peace and not single-person-oriented operation. And that's exactly what she decided to provide back in episode 6, when everyone reunited, when Caitlyn finally turned against Ambessa, and when her hatred was finally gone. With Jinx and Caitlyn, it always comes down either to Vi or their parents, and this time was no different. Caitlyn knew what it was like to lose a parent, her mother, person maybe different than her, but one she no doubt deeply loved. That's why the moment she found out Vi needed her, that Vander was back, she immediately was present for her, as she should have been back in Act 1 when no one seemed to notice how much Vi suffered as well. But it wasn't just Vi that she was present for, and that's so crucial. Caitlyn obviously knew Vander is just as much Jinx's father, and she still showed up. She still was there. It's unclear if she knew Jinx was present in the commune. In fact, perhaps she didn't, since she reacted the way she did. But even then, even when she finally encountered Jinx right there next to her, within her hand's reach, her reaction was no longer strong, by far not as strong as it was back in Act 1 upon their encounter. And I think there's two reasons for it. First one being the fact she just got Vi back. She wasn't willing to threaten the relationship again, immediately after being reminded of the cupcake that she used to be. Second one, more important, being the fact she saw Jinx as the daughter that she herself was, a daughter that just got her parent back. And more than that, Jinx did not seem to acknowledge Caitlyn's presence anymore. She saw her, but did not pursue any kind of revenge. To Jinx, after everything she has been through, after reuniting with Vander and Vi, after receiving from Vi continuous proof she still loves her, after being seen by Isha as who she once was, and finally, after killing Cassandra without ever wanting to, hatred towards Caitlyn felt void. She even went as far as saving Caitlyn from Rictus, no doubt knowing from Vi the ultimate goal of her being there is helping Vander. Jinx killed her mother, yet Caitlyn showed up to protect her father. At this point it's becoming clear that Caitlyn's hatred towards Jinx was becoming void as well. As soon as hell broke loose, as soon as Ambessa attacked the commune, Caitlyn and Jinx stood side by side, ready to protect Vander, ready to protect Isha, right by Vi's side, no longer fighting who's more important in the equation, who she loves more. One could wonder if they would even have time to continue their fight in that very moment with more important matters at hand. But regardless, there once was a time when they never would have played for the same team, even under the most difficult circumstances. That's when we reach the prison scene, which now should be a little more understandable from viewers' perspective, because it's a brief conversation really. And none of the things they discuss happened immediately. None of it happened right there in the cell. Caitlyn went down there on some unconscious level already ready to forgive. And the direct trigger was her conversation with Vi. It was Vi who once more, and perhaps in the grandest way possible thus far, became her moral compass, one that Caitlyn used to be in Season 1. Through a couple of short sentences, she exposed her own undoings, exposed she was not quite different to Jinx. She also committed questionable acts. She also became obsessed and let the feelings get the best of her. She became inattentive to Ambessa crawling behind her back, trying to control Piltover. She reached out to measures Season 1 Caitlyn wouldn't have. She allowed for Maddie to approach her and not realize she was there to spy. Caitlyn was not the one to place Jinx in the cell, we know as much. At least there's that. But she sure had to make a decision now. And is she really the right person for it regardless of everything? Isn't she too emotionally involved to place Jinx on trial? Do we allow in criminal trials for the victim's family to decide the fate of the accused? We don't, and for a good reason, lack of objectivity. Caitlyn, despite being a fair person, could never provide a fair trial. In fact, no trial was to be held, because at this point, she knew Jinx is not quite the same person anymore. She finally listened to Vi. She herself saw the daughter that Jinx was, the sister that she still is, the love for Isha she provided, and unconditional support for Vander. Support she herself would have easily given to Cassandra Kierman if only she was given one more chance. Jinx was in a cell left at Caitlyn's mercy, decision regarding her fate in her hands. And I trust going down there she already made that decision, maybe even back in Victor's commune, perhaps not realizing it fully yet. She couldn't hold on to hatred if she understood the reasons behind someone's actions, why Jinx did the things that she did. Why was she sitting there right in front of her, broken, devastated, her fingers self-harmed, clear sign of anxiety and depression? Jinx has given up. Perhaps Caitlyn did not know it. Perhaps it wouldn't have made her feel sorry for her given everything. But she sure was not going to have her convicted when she just saved her own life, when she just helped Vi save Vander, when she just lost an unlikely family member. More than that, Caitlyn saw that the only thing Jinx cared about was getting Vi to safety. Now doesn't that sound familiar? Jinx was not quite equipped to apologize. She never grew up in a healthy environment ever since Silco took her in. And can you even apologize for killing someone's parent? However, I strongly believe her admitting she did not know Cassandra was in the council building is as big of a regret as Jinx could have shown, as grand of an apology as she could have offered to someone she now realized she no longer wants to or has to fight. Vi accepted her, and in return, she also needed to accept Vi, along with her love for Caitlyn. On the other hand, Caitlyn admitting we cannot erase our mistakes did not seem to be aimed at Jinx alone. More than that, it seemed like she meant mostly herself, her own undoings, her own faults, miscalculations, letting herself be overwhelmed with grief, allowing hatred to enter, losing sight of the fact each person's acts are a result of a grander, inequality-oriented scheme, exposing herself to manipulation and perhaps most of all, failing Vi, pushing her away. That's something that they both at some points of their journeys did. They tried to manipulate Vi. They tried to tear her apart, take parts of her that belong to the other one and get rid of them, ignoring the fact Vi doesn't love just one person. The fact she used plural form indicates she wasn't just facing Jinx, she was facing herself. No amount of good deeds can undo our crimes. We cannot erase our mistakes. Jinx was ready to accept Caitlyn's punishment, offered herself on a silver platter to someone who spent months chasing her without success. Given the fact we know she has given up being stuck in that limbo of hers, she'd probably welcome it. She would treat Caitlyn killing her as doing her a favor. Her hair, now visibly long and loose, perhaps not once cut ever since Silco took her in because granted, he was by far not the father of the year, often treating her as a tool rather than actual daughter, symbolized all the dense feeling weighing her down ever since she was separated from Vi by the end of Act 3 and Season 1. And even Caitlyn, upon her return, once Echo saved her, she finally cut, drawing an invisible line between her past troubled self and present self that decided to give Piltover, her sister, and even Caitlyn, one last chance. Kate was no longer the same person that was willing to shoot her either, no longer one willing to give up parts of her own nature chasing revenge. It's by far not the same two people that used to fight back in Act 1, or obsess over each other in both seasons. It wasn't the same feelings. So Caitlyn, let her go. Let the hatred go. She provided the biggest act of love she possibly could have for Vi, finally accepting Jinx as her sister, almost giving a statement. She's no longer going to stand between them. She accepted the fact it's not up to her to decide someone's fate, when she herself should be judged, and without a doubt she internally did. Most of all, she provided an act of love towards herself. The hatred that she felt led to her becoming a person she no longer recognized, a person that pushed Vi away, someone she never wanted to be again. Now that Vi was in her life again, she wasn't going to fail her once more. That day, Caitlyn and Jinx met in a cell, one captured, the other one capturer, about to make a decision. And although they were physically on opposite sides of the bars, mentally they were on the same side. On Vi's side. Thank you so much for watching. Major shout out to my patrons, as always, really appreciate your support.